Hi guys, welcome back to Alamat, where we translate and narrate Philippine myths, urban legends, and horror stories to share with the world. Our tale for this week is about the author's personal experience with a particular kind of spirit. This tale is called Be Kind to Her, Please by Red Cheese Queen. My mother told me about her when I was young, long before we painted the farmhouse blue. It happened suddenly, and only a few months back had we painted the gate to the front main house, the very same blue, just as suddenly. I think I'm not being clear. I lived in the Philippines as a kid, about 7 hours out of Manila. My family lived close together. There are two houses that we lived in. The one on the mainland road, which was my grandmother's. It was kind of like the main hub where the family would meet every day. Then one about 2 miles back into the rice farms, where we were living most of the time. The farmhouse was the house my mother owned, her sister living next to her. I preferred Grandma's house, even if it was small. 4 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and the bathroom with a small pig pen out back. I'm getting sidetracked thinking about my childhood. But I remember my mother not looking at me as she said, "White ladies don't like blue." When I brought the subject up again, she said she just liked the color, like she never told me her first reason. I guess she thought she scared me and changed her story. Stories about white ladies were common growing up. My cousins would scare me with them. But one story that stood out to me, not the stories of them standing at the foot of your bed or watching you from afar, but the one my mother told me long before the house was painted. I'm getting ahead of myself again. White ladies, from my recollection, were women that were dressed in white, who would never speak and would always appear in a house painted white, or was primarily white. The exact details are hazy. Sometimes they would appear before you died, other times they just don't do anything but watch. Anyway, my mother told me about her aunt. Unfortunately, that could have meant an older cousin or an actual great aunt or someone not even related to us at all, due to honorific conventions. So I couldn't figure out which relative this was about. And her experience with the white lady. My aunt couldn't sleep. She got up in the middle of the night to make herself instant coffee. I don't remember what occurred, but the white lady was there in the kitchen. My aunt wasn't scared because she knew what the white lady was, and I think she appeared as a younger relative. My aunt smiled and asked her if she wanted to join her. The white lady sat at the table with her in the middle of the night and waited for my aunt to finish making them coffee, and waited for her to sit down. I asked my mother if my aunt was scared. She said my aunt wasn't. Again, details are a bit fuzzy, but my aunt would chat with her, and eventually, she left. This then became a regular occurrence. My aunt would sometimes come down to find her, have coffee with the white lady, and chat. This story stuck with me because it was the only one I heard, a white lady that didn't make me feel scared. But why didn't my mom want her around if she thought blue would keep her away? Years passed. I forgot about the story. Not until my mother demanded we paint the house blue. We live in Australia now, and our house was painted with a yellow-white hue, and had been for years. She had bought the paint herself, and when we came home she said it was the number one priority. The same blue as the gate, the farmhouse we had. I have to say, I was miffed after the job. I got sunburnt, and my nickname of Red came back something fierce. I never said anything about why she wanted it done, but again, I wondered why she wanted to keep the white lady away if she never did anything bad, and why now, when the story had been long since forgotten. Unless she hadn't told me the whole story. Or maybe the entire White Lady story had been entirely fictional and my mom really just liked the shade of blue. This is the part where the story takes a turn. Because why would I bother writing down this story and my mother's house color preferences? Because for a week last December, I lived in a white house. I was in Canberra, in a rental apartment with 5 other people. We were there for a 4-day event and we were staying for a week. It was cramped and I had to share a bed with my friend, and pretty much everyone shared a bed. I woke up around midnight. You can predict that I got up, unable to sleep due to the tournament, and everyone else was sound asleep. I went into the kitchen and turned the dim light on. I can tell you, I nearly jumped out of my skin. I did not scream because I hadn't wanted to wake anyone up. A woman appears in your kitchen and you don't freak out? Liar. But honestly, after the initial surprise, I felt calm. She wore white. I did not recognize her, but she felt very familiar. She was small and petite, but definitely older than me, even if I was a good 2 inches taller than her. My cousins back home would lament that having Australian genes turned me into a giant amongst them. Her black hair tied loosely, back behind her head. She was pale, but looked lively. I knew what to do. I don't like coffee, but would you like a hot chocolate? I asked softly, hoping to not wake anyone. But I did not hear anyone stir. She nodded after a moment of looking thoughtful. You can sit if you like. I'll be a moment. The kettle thankfully boiled quietly as I took 2 cups out of the cupboard and got milk. I didn't hear the chair creak on the tile floor, but when I turned back, she was sitting at the small kitchen table, watching me, looking almost puzzled. You're a long way from home, aren't you? I asked. She nodded, a small nod, and I placed the hot chocolate in front of her. She seemed to stare into it as she put her hands on either side of the cup, as if warming her hands. I continued to talk about the upcoming tournament, about my mom, and she nodded and expressed emotions on her face, intently listening to my words. When she looked confused, I would elaborate. Our chat on the first night was brief. Someone had gotten up to use the restroom, and in a moment, she was gone. I was left at the small table with 2 hot chocolates as a teammate walked in. Long story short, he was very confused, but thankfully just went back to bed without asking me anything. The next day, after the first day of the tournament, we all headed to bed early. Even with my bruises and stiffness from the day, I woke up again to find her in the kitchen. This happened for the rest of the week. I told her about our wins and our losses, and told her about my teammates and how they were like my extended family. She seemed happy just by me talking to her. I wondered if she was lonely. Did she still visit my aunt? I wanted to ask about my mother and why my mom didn't want her around. But there was never an instance where she looked like she wanted to talk, or if she could. It occurred to me that she might actually speak or understand English. Before rationalizing that she couldn't just nod throughout our entire conversation, even if she did. But she was paying attention in everything. She understood me just fine, so I never asked. On the last night, the team celebrated by drinking out at the bar. We scored in the top half of the ranks, and I'll leave it at that. I did not see her that night because we all got back to the house at around 1:30 a.m. Drunkenly, my teammate that disturbed us on the first night got the stuff out to make hot chocolate and asked if I would make another extra for my imaginary friend. This had gotten everyone's attention, so I told them what I was doing up at midnight for the past week. I was already the weird one on the team, so what if I told them? I was met with a mix of reactions. Our coach had half scolded me and half jabbed that maybe that was why my passes were sloppy that week. Others with skepticism, of course, but didn't try to tell me I was stupid for believing what I saw. Some in their drunkenness just believed me. When you're the quirky one of the team, you get a little bit of leeway. I had my issues and I tried to downplay them as much as possible, but the team was still aware of my history of anxiety and depression and would make an effort to keep me from certain triggers. They're good people. No one called me crazy, and I really appreciated that. Especially when the logical side began to question if I really was speaking with a white lady. I wasn't crazy. I know I was talking to someone because I wasn't drinking the second cup of hot chocolate. So that night, before everyone went to bed, I left the hot chocolate out on the kitchen table and told no one to touch it. I felt bad for not being able to say goodbye before having to leave to my blue house and hoped she knew I was sorry about it. We found the cup empty the next day. Immediately, someone pointed out that someone must have drunk it in the middle of the night, but no one owned up to it. After breakfast, we all packed into our designated cars to make the annoying long trip home. Someone in the back seat asked if I had made the story up, in all honesty. And that's when, well, he just asked that question and I looked in the mirror from the front passenger seat so I can see my teammate as I answered. My heart skipped a beat. The white lady was sitting where my friend was supposed to be. Two thoughts immediately crossed my mind in that moment. The car was silver, like it fucking mattered. The second, as I remembered that white ladies were supposed to be omens, I yelled for us to get off the highway. I yelled until I was almost hysterical for us to pull over. My heart pounding as I never took my eyes off the mirror as the white lady, her face that I had become so accustomed to, smiling kindly at me, just looked neutral and resigned. As the driver slowed down, telling me to calm down, believing I was having an anxiety attack. I later found out a truck came barreling out of the side road, going a lot faster than the speed limit and clipped the front of the car. I can tell you now, it came out of nowhere. No honk, nothing to indicate it was coming our way, and it just continued. Our driver got control back and quickly parked us on the side of the highway. It was almost out of sight when the truck finally stopped. We learned later that the driver had fallen asleep for a second, and the next moment he knew he had clipped us. We had to wait for the other cars with teammates to catch us up, to redistribute people into new cars, as our driver was too shaken up to continue the rest of the way, even if the only damage had been just the headlight getting wrecked. Everyone was some degree of shaken. If we hadn't slowed down when we did, the truck would have hit us square on, and everyone in the car knew it. I had been truthful when they asked me how I knew to stop. Since then, the team began a ritual. Every time we had stayed the night somewhere, they would leave a hot chocolate out. A thank you, a good luck, a hope we get home safely, all rolled into one. New teammates were curious, but did not believe the story, and I don't expect them to. I wondered if they would continue the tradition long after I was gone. And now you must be wondering again, why now am I telling you this story? I had been living in an apartment for the last few months, and I hadn't seen the white lady since seeing her in the car. She appeared in my kitchen just like the first time 34 days ago. I greeted her and thanked her for saving not just my life, but my teammate and friends' lives. She looked sad. I made her a hot chocolate and tried talking to her, but she just looked on the verge of tears. "Are you okay?" I asked. She shook her head. She did not seem to want to make eye contact with me. 30 days ago, I just collapsed. One minute, I was upright and laughing on my way to class. The next, I was surrounded by worried faces. My legs all bruised up from falling downstairs. That should have been the first warning. I got sick, I got dizzy, and some days I could barely walk without wanting to vomit. I had to stop going to training And that was the worst thing in the world. I had just thought it was a downward cycle, anxiety and depression making me sick, and my sickness just caused me to worsen mentally. My concentration got worse than it was, and people sounded like they started warbling. Every night the white lady would appear in the kitchen. Sometimes her hands were on her head, already sitting at a table. She looked as miserable as I felt. Fuck. I just stopped myself writing eclipses like an idiot. The next lapse was a seizure, a big one. I woke up in the hospital. The brain scan showed a tumor the size of a thumb. Evidence shows that it's been growing for over a year, maybe more, despite my young age making one improbable. They want to cut it out, but I know it's inoperable. I knew that I lost my window 34 days ago, the night she appeared again. My stupid hospital room has white tiles, but painted baby blue. Not the shade my mother uses, but it had to be what kept her from visiting me. I'm not allowed to leave my bed, and I can't make her hot chocolate in the cafeteria. I want to see her so bad because I want to tell her that this isn't her fault and not to blame herself. I am 100% sure that I should have died that day on the highway. I'm sure that the aunt that saw the white lady is already dead, and my mom just didn't tell me, but I don't care. I want to thank her for saving my friends, even if now I was going to die. I would rather die here, alone, than in a car full of people that were like my family on a damn highway. Was a tumor the result of fate balancing the books? I don't know. The thought drives me wild. If I was supposed to die that day, and by extension my friends were as well, then were they going to suffer like I am? Maybe not today or tomorrow, but eventually. Christ, I hope not. I wish, please let it just be me. Please, if you see her, tell her it's not her fault and I don't blame her. Please. You might not see my white lady though. That didn't occur to me just until now, so she might never know. Or, have I had a tumor nested in my head for over a year? My white lady, were you even real? I don't know anymore. It's hard to concentrate long and my head's beginning to hurt a lot despite the painkillers. But I've tried my hardest to write it all down, and it's been my project all day. What do you guys think of this week's story? It has a sad ending, but it's good to know that some spirits would like to support us and help us along the way. If you're enjoying the content so far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast to your friends and family. If you have stories you'd want me to narrate, send them over at mrelamatph@gmail.com. Salamat guys, and see you in the next one.